Hello. Our story begins inside the forest of Takodana as the First Order arrived to find BB-8. Maz's castle erupted as TIE fighters flew across the skies, burning down what was once such a prideful establishment. Kylo Ren's shuttle landed in the middle of the battlefield, as the division began hunting down and killing the smugglers, pirates, and bounty hunters that were once inside the castle. Kylo was informed that the BB unit they were looking for was in the forest, accompanied by a girl. Ren immediately turned and booked it into the forest. At the same time, Finn, Chewie, and Han exited from the basement of the castle to engage with the stormtroopers as they piled into the now ruined monument. Rey at the same time was being chased by a few stormtroopers. She shot a few times, missed the first couple, but landed the right hit before turning back and continuing her escape. As she made her escape, the sound of a lightsaber could be heard. She backpedaled, keeping her eyes open, looking for the sound of the blade. Out from around a rock or two, she could see the mask of Kylo Ren. It was terrifying, and so she opened fire. Right above her, two men dropped out of the air, slamming down into the ground. They were in the middle of the battle, and they had a few short moments to react before realizing that they were right in the middle of another one. They had no clue where they were, but they knew why they were supposed to be here. Kind of. Still didn't make a ton of sense to them. When they looked around, Obi Wan noticed the red lightsaber, and then they saw the girl leap up from the ground to their level. Kenobi told his former student to get to that girl and figure out what was going on. Anakin looked back, still trying to recover from what they had been told. He watched Obi Wan drop off the ledge in front of them. Anakin looked up after hearing the sound of the lightsaber blades clashing together. He shook his head and saw the girl continuing to run away from the conflict. He looked down below to see Obi Wan interlocked in a battle with a taller man wearing black robes and a mask. He was also holding a crossguard, which was a weird sight. Anakin knew he couldn't get involved. The space was too tight anyway, so he leapt across the rocks to follow the girl. It was a hot pursuit, considering another man just spawned out of the forest and started chasing her. Obi-Wan and Kylo were interlocked until Kylo thought he recognized Obi-Wan. It was a hollow recording from Luke's old temple, and it was one Luke himself found of Obi-Wan in the ruins of an Imperial warehouse. Because Kylo could recognize the Jedi Master, he was very quickly confused by the appearance of Kenobi, but he thought what a better way to prove his worth by finishing what Vader technically couldn't finish. Their duel was fierce, but Obi-Wan was taking it easily. There was such a huge disconnect between them. Kenobi was from a war, from an era where the Jedi had an established structure. Obi-Wan had far more experience than Kylo likely would have ever had he never turned to the dark side. Ben was the greatest student inside the Jedi Order at the time, but there was only so much Luke acquired in the years since the fall of the Empire. For the 13 years he trained Ben, there's only so much he could be taught. To think Kylo could go toe-to-toe with Obi-Wan was of course far-fetched, because how was he supposed to? The amount he could learn severely differed from what Obi-Wan learned at a young age, the age of a youngling. Once that became clear in their engagement, Obi-Wan was able to push Kylo back through the forest. By the time he got to the edge of the forest, the resistance had arrived. Across the battlefield as Rey continued running from Anakin, Finn took notice, igniting the Skywalker saber and running towards Anakin. He was so preoccupied he didn't even notice until the last second. Anakin ducked under a heavy swipe made by Finn, before turning back and throwing his hands up, blocking the strike with the Force. Anakin looked down, wondering how Finn was holding his exact lightsaber. He threw Finn back with relative ease before pulling his lightsaber with the Force. Rey noticed that Finn came to her aid and turned to help him, raising his blaster, and so when Skywalker turned around, he sidestepped the shot and asked why she fired at him. The sound of Kylo running past them caught their attention. Rey turned her blaster and fired at him as he entered his vessel, pulling the division off of Takodana and retreating. Resistance fighters were already here. No point to try and maintain this fight. They won the day. Kylo would now need assistance from Supreme Leader Snoke. On the ground, Han and Chewie searched for BB-8, Finn, and Rey. They came around to see what could only be described as confusion. Not just for Han, but for Chewie. Finn was on the ground, Rey was pointing her blaster, Obi-Wan was trying to calm the situation down, and Anakin was making the situation more tense by waving his glowstick around. Han told everyone to put their weapons down, and he realized something. Well, if it wasn't the man that Ben Solo was named after. But what was he doing here? What confused Han was the fact that he of course saw Ben Kenobi on the Death Star, but he had since seen holograms and images of young Obi-Wan, and well, that was him. On the other hand, he recognized Anakin, kind of, but he didn't know where from. Leia never really mentioned Anakin much, and the same with the images of him, she didn't show him off. She didn't care for him the same way she did Obi-Wan. Chewie, on the other hand, was confused why a Clone Wars era Jedi was here. He recognized Anakin from the fact that he was the Jedi Master of the Togruta girl he encountered on the Trandoshan hunting moon so many years ago. It wasn't an instant recognition, but it was clear that it was the same Jedi. Everyone got even more confused when C-3PO came with a red arm, and so did Leia. seeing this little standoff, of course. Leia recognized both her father and Obi Wan instantly and tried to understand how this was at all possible. When Leia got there, she was able to calm the situation down, but she didn't know who Finn and Rey were yet. But as long as everyone calmed down, lowered their weapons, and spoke, then she should be able to help them figure out who each other were. Obi Wan and Anakin didn't reveal why they were here, and they wouldn't, not yet. But Leia would clear the air, explaining to everyone who everyone was. It was the fact that Obi Wan and Anakin were here from another era for some reason, and she was Anakin's daughter, and that was Anakin's son-in-law, and these other people she didn't even know. Leia was a general of the Resistance though. They needed to go back to the Elenium system so they could figure out what it was that just destroyed the Hosnian system. Everything was chaos, and for Obi Wan and Anakin to hear about the destruction of an entire star system, it was a little unorthodox. What did that mean? Of course they knew about Hosnian, but how could an entire system be destroyed? What kind of chaos existed in this galaxy? There was also a lot to reveal about everything that had since happened in this galaxy. On the way to Dakar, Anakin and Obi-Wan learned what actually happened since they left. The entire story was exactly the same. The only difference is, Obi-Wan and Anakin were split from themselves. While it wasn't entirely described to them with their mission, they knew that they would fully understand their actions and what had been done. Both Obi-Wan and Anakin never left their current timeline, but they did at the same time. The first worked in mysterious ways, and in this way, it showed that in their failure to get rid of the darkness, it was able to plague multiple generations. Han was trying to figure out how any of this was possible, and Leia was unsure. Because despite being told everything they were just told, Obi-Wan and Anakin continued to keep their mission mandate a secret. They felt no incentive to tell anyone why they were here. Their only hope was to complete it and hopefully find some sort of balance in this new era. There would be no going back, and they knew that now. Anakin was struggling with the concept of having children, especially being that his daughter was currently 40 or so years older than he was. Both Anakin and Obi-Wan thought that Finn was a Jedi because he was holding a lightsaber. Anakin and Obi-Wan took an immediate interest in what Finn might know regarding the Force and the Jedi. He truthfully had no clue. This did mess with Rey's mind too, but she made the decision to reject the blade, still fearing what it was that lived within her. Her biggest fear being what that was too. She knew that there was always something within her, but the lightsaber calling to her made her realize that more, and she feared it. Her imposter syndrome was making her run laps around herself, and so she feared the idea of bringing it up to either Obi-Wan or Anakin. To have a kyber crystal, especially one that belonged to another person, call out to you is incredibly identifying for young Jedi. It shows that the Force calls for a journey upon an individual. What was Anakin's was Luke's, and what was Luke's called to Rey to continue the journey. Instead of being with the Jedi, Rey found herself with Han and Chewie. She identified more with Han simply due to her upbringing. They could relate more, and he was the closest thing she ever really had to a father figure. Han was accepting of her looking up to him and being around him. When they returned to Dakar, the analysis was shown of what the reconnaissance showed, which was the incredible size of Starkiller Base. The holo recording showed off the size of the Death Stars in comparison to the massive weapon. Obi-Wan and Anakin couldn't believe their eyes, or the fact that the future was destined for such atrocities. Well, I guess it was technically the past now. They kept quiet in the back of the room as individuals around the circle spoke up about how they could destroy it. Finn was already eager looking for a way out of this fight. He was afraid of the fight against the First Order. He knew what they were capable of, but fate was calling upon him to do something brave. He was a former stormtrooper. He knew his way around, not a lot, but more than anyone around here did. So instinctively he called out, suggesting that he knew a way in, but he needed to be on the ground. Due to the shields around the base, Han would have to resort to exciting flying. It was set. Anakin told them that he would join Poe in an X-Wing, which looked a lot like a Z-95 Headhunter, just with extra wings. The Resistance had an extra one, and he could make good use of it. He was a great pilot. Plus, he and Poe were already getting along. Not quite as well as Finn and Poe, but close enough. Han piled Kenobi, Chewie, Rey, and Finn into the Falcon for their assault on the Starkiller. At the same time, Anakin and Poe were bromancing over the whole cockpit of an X-Wing. They were very spacious in comparison to Jedi starfighters. Anakin asked for some tips on using an X-Wing to its max potential. Anakin almost asked for an A-Wing because of their speed, but the S-foils was something he was a lot more used to. Poe showed him around the maneuvers, and they let him take an X-Wing for a spin. He loved it the second he got into it, even getting used to some harsh turns and pulls, getting a feel for the size of the vessel, and learning how to maximize its speed. It was slower than the Jedi starfighter simply because it was larger than it, but he would make it work. After his test run, they filled it up with some more fuel and prepared for their assault on the Starkiller. The squad on the ground quickly made their way to the base and eventually intercepted Captain Phasma, using her to take down the shields. Obi-Wan was noticing something about the girl that he hadn't before, though he was unsure. He was just picking up on it because of the dyad between Kylo and her made her essence radiate a bit more since they were in closer proximity to each other. With the shields down, the Starkiller was preparing its super weapon for an attack on the Resistance. Poe Dameron led his fighters into an assault against the weapon as a number of TIE fighters moved to intercept them. Inside the base, the group was making their way to the protective shell around the thermal oscillators. They may have not known it, but Kylo was tracking them down. With extra members with them, they were able to lay down their bombs across the structure itself. However, just as Kylo was searching for his father, Han forced Kenobi to release his grip on his forearm. Obi-Wan saw Han heading for the catwalk, but a father's love cannot be stopped. Han didn't care what happened to him. He would do everything within his power to save his son. His actions did lead to his own death, but the effect it would have on Ben's psyche was irreversible damage. Kylo may have thought he could live through this, but he never felt so much pain in his entire life, which was shortly after accompanied by a blaster shot to the stomach with an explosive round from a crossbow. When the explosion went off, it separated Finn and Rey from Chewie and Obi-Wan. Outside the massive structure, X-Wings were taking evasive action. Dameron and Skywalker were working as a duo. Their skills were unmatched. Anakin was impressed that Poe could fly with the best of them, and he wasn't even a Jedi. They were providing cover fire until it was clear there was a hole for them to get to the thermal oscillator. Poe dove down right into the trench with Skywalker flying right behind him. They avoided fire from the turbo lasers as Poe dove in first, pulling his foils in and releasing them. Skywalker did the exact same thing. The two of them began dumping torpedoes into the side of the shaft, exploding every little piece they could. Starkiller Base was doomed to fall. Poe gave Skywalker the lead out, but it was quickly passed back and the two X-Wings pulled out of the explosive ring. Finn, Rey, Chewie, and Obi-Wan ran to find the Falcon, but Finn and Rey had the misfortune of running into Kylo Ren in the forest. He was clearly struggling, not just physically but mentally. He hit his side continuously, hoping the physical pain would drown out the mental torment of having killed his father. Finn engaged in a duel with Kylo, which lasted for a couple minutes, until a scream from Finn got Rey to wake up from being knocked out. Obi-Wan, who was running through the forest, searched for the two of them and heard the scream and ran in their direction. As Kenobi arrived, he quickly reached out and was able to throw Kylo backwards before he could cut through Finn's back. The young dark side user was enraged, but he could see that it was Kenobi. Having lost him earlier, he knew he wouldn't be able to best him here in this moment, especially with his injury. Kylo turned to the Skywalker lightsaber, which had been knocked out of Finn's hand, and landed a good number of feet away from the two of them. Kylo reached out his hand and tried to pull it into his hand so he could escape with his grandfather's weapon, one that rightfully belonged to him in his own mind. Obi-Wan watched and was confused. Kylo was an experienced Force user and he couldn't get a grip on it. As Obi-Wan kept his eyes peeled, he was floored when the weapon soared past Kylo and into Rey's hands. Finn, Kylo, and Obi-Wan were all left in shock, but the lightsaber called to her. The Force wasn't just strong with her, but it was with her. The ignition of the blade forced Ren to run into the forest, hoping to find another means of fighting off these Jedi in the future. Rey attempted the chase, but Finn and Obi-Wan stopped her. Their fight would come later. Chewie was able to get to the Falcon to pick them up. The Falcon met up with the escaping X-Wings as Starkiller Base exploded behind them, and they made their jump to Dakar. Their arrival to the Resistance base was met with excitement and celebration. Obviously, the death of General Solo was a hard hit for those closest to him, but the First Order lost its power. They had their fleets, but Starkiller was gone. Leia, before anyone arrived, called out to Admiral Akbar, who had miraculously survived. He was bringing the last of the Resistance forces to Dakar so they could begin escaping. The Raddus could fit everyone in it, and they would be able to look for reinforcements scoured across the Outer Rim. While Han's passing was painful, old R2 woke up and helped piece together the map that would eventually lead to Luke Skywalker. Leia would have loved to have been the first person to pull him from the island, but Leia was the general. The First Order was most likely on the way here, and she needed to lead. However, she suggested that the Jedi take either Finn or Rey or both of them and go to the island and find him. Obi-Wan realized that this likely would be one of their most desperate hours. Being as Leia suggested, Obi-Wan had a tremendous effect on both of them, that Obi-Wan should go to Ahch-To with the young one. Kenobi initially was prepared to take Rey, but he decided that he would take Finn. In his own opinion, it'd be best to keep both old and new separated just for now. Anakin would be more useful here with the Resistance. If he could find Luke with Finn, perhaps they could both help Luke and unlock Finn's potential. It was another reason why Obi-Wan wanted to take Finn. There is a significant difference between Finn and Rey. While Rey had a terrible imposter syndrome, which caused a lot of internal struggles for her, Finn was attuned to the Force but didn't realize it yet. It was kind of hidden below the surface, which was the only issue. Obi-Wan knew how to work it out of him, because he had to do it with himself. Kenobi also had a feeling that Anakin and Rey would hit it off too. Their personalities were in a way similar, but also very different. She was much more interested in learning than he was, which should make her training very easy for him. She wanted to learn, whereas Finn had to be opened up some more before he could learn. Anakin agreed because he would likely get more action on this side of things. And while he was eager to meet his son, he would be useful in defending his daughter from the First Order whenever they might show themselves. It was agreed upon. Rey would stay with Anakin and Finn would come with Obi-Wan to Ahch-To. Once the Falcon left, the Raddus arrived and the Resistance began their evacuation. Poe, Rey, and Anakin got to the bridge of the Raddus, with Leia as soon as they could. Everything was going fantastically until the First Order fleet arrived at hyperspace with a dreadnought. Anakin looked at Poe, who grinned with his pearly whites, and they left the bridge. Skywalker followed behind him. Rey looked to Rey, who quickly raised her eyebrows in a dismissing way. This would be exciting. Anakin followed Poe out to the hangar bay as the two of them kept their distance from each other. General Hux reached out to Poe, who did nothing but stall. Another case of Imperial officers getting too cocky with their position of power, trying to flaunt it. Truthfully, Poe didn't care. He was here to stall, and he played a game. This made Anakin like him even more. He just had this swagger. Skywalker listened and laughed as Poe then hit the thrusters. He was the only one with them installed, so Skywalker sped up to the dreadnought, keeping a little bit of distance behind. The surface cannons on the dreadnought opened fire on the X-Wing that Poe was flying, but they had no chance. Skywalker was close behind him. The fight was quick, but when Leia requested Poe to fall back, Anakin reinforced the idea that they should leave. Poe was right though. These dreadnoughts were fleet killers, but they didn't have time to deal with it. Skywalker was adamant that they listen to his daughter, so instead of targeting it with a bombing fleet, Poe and Anakin broke down the center of the dreadnought and buzzed the bridge. They quickly piloted around the back and targeted the hyperdrive. The object was to leave the ship dead in space. The hyperdrive was a bit covered, but 2 full torpedo volleys from X-Wings did the job. Poe and Anakin broke back to the fleet and escaped into hyperspace. Leia was really annoyed, but because there weren't mass casualties, she withheld her anger. She expressed to Poe that next time he didn't follow orders, he would be demoted. His actions could have caused them to stall for too long, or worse. The Resistance didn't have spare troops or bombers or pilots, and he needed to understand that. The Alliance or the Resistance was full of heroes who jumped into their cockpits and got things done. But Poe was a leader, and to be a leader, he needed to understand when the right time to blow something up was, and when the improper time to do so was. Anakin did reinforce this sentiment simply because, as a wartime general, he understood. Leia then brought forward the next order of business, Rey handling her training. Leia picked up on something, but she didn't believe Anakin knew at the moment, so the three of them broke off from the bridge during the trip through hyperspace and had a little talk about Rey. Across the galaxy on Ahch-To, Chewie landed the Millennium Falcon. Obi-Wan and Finn walked out the ship. Finn was excited, but truthfully not as excited as Obi-Wan. Kenobi was such a nerd for this kind of stuff. It had been his dream to see such ancient places of the Jedi. Ahch-To was always a dream destination, but since the Clone Wars were active, he couldn't leave the temple. He planned on visiting after the war ended, though that apparently would have never happened. He and Finn had a conversation on their trip from Dakar to Ahch-To, and they had a fairly decent understanding of each other. Obi-Wan wanted to help Finn the best he could. Luckily, the Falcon had a small training probe inside of it, which he used and Finn used during the trip through hyperspace. He still hadn't made it clear about their reasoning for being here. His hope was that it could be revealed when the time was right. They climbed the steps to the top of the temple island of Ahch-To. Obi-Wan told Finn everything he knew about it. Some of the earliest teachings of the Jedi were taught here. The balance of harmony and light were founded here. Obi-Wan climbed a few more steps and turned back, telling Finn that this was the birthplace of the Jedi Order. Finn was taken aback. They continued talking as they got to the top of the steps. When they finally found Luke, he was wearing his ceremonial robes, standing at the edge of the island. Had Obi-Wan and Finn not arrived, he would have attempted to burn the tree that housed the old documents of the Jedi and end the religion forever. When Luke turned around, he was shocked to say the least, but it took a moment for him to realize that somehow Kenobi returned. Luke had a million questions, and Obi-Wan could answer them all, but he was very informational about what had happened, and it didn't take Obi-Wan long to realize. Leia's essence was vibrant. Obi-Wan very quickly understood, being that he was trained as a Force user, that Luke had cut himself off from the Force. Kenobi looked back at Finn and put his hand up, gesturing to step back. Obi-Wan asked Luke what had happened, and why he was willing to cut himself off from the Force. Luke was hesitant, but then explained it in his first iteration, the one he wished had happened, a Rashomon effect, if you will, one where he went into the hut and Ben turned on him for no reason. But Obi-Wan could see it. Luke wasn't telling the whole truth about everything. So Luke told Obi-Wan the whole truth, what actually happened. Because while Obi-Wan wasn't familiar with the history of the galaxy, he knew some beats and points thanks to Leia. Luke told Obi-Wan that he trained Ben solo. There were moments in his training where he had shown glimpses of darkness. One night, Luke went into Ben's hut and into his mind, and it was far worse than anything he could have ever imagined. Luke said word for word, Snoke had already turned his heart. He would bring destruction and pain and death at the end of everything he loved, and for the briefest moment of pure instinct, he thought he could stop it. Luke admitted that it passed like a fleeting shadow, and he was left with shame and with consequence. Luke expressed that he had failed as an instructor, but Obi-Wan was ready. He may have not seen Anakin become Vader, but he understood. Luke never went in there with the intention to kill Ben. Not even the ignition of his lightsaber was signifying that he wanted to hurt him. Obi-Wan had it too. The Force was so strong, and visions could bring you in. If Luke was capable of defeating the Sith before, the very thing he would fear the most is allowing the Sith to rise again. His instincts were natural, and they didn't make him a bad person. It only made him human. From one master to another, Obi-Wan understood. He didn't think Luke ever had ill intentions. Ill intentions not even crossing his mind. Finn just listened, not really understanding much. Obi-Wan asked Luke why he came here, and he expressed that the Jedi needed to be ended. Obi-Wan knew no present or past in which the Jedi had failed, but he knew an order that was actively fighting the war. Luke expressed that every time darkness rose, it was a direct result of the Jedi. In the days of old, at the height of their power, the Order allowed the rise of Darth Sidious and the creation of Darth Vader. Now, it was the rise of Snoke and the creation of Kylo Ren. Luke was again adamant that he came here for the religion to die, because as a Jedi, he could only make the situation worse, and then he continued a bit further, because both of his teachers did the same thing. When everything went bad, Obi-Wan and Yoda went into hiding, hoping that the next saviors would come along and right the wrongs of their mistakes. It was a mess, and Obi-Wan didn't blame Luke. Instead, he suggested that Luke put the weight of the galaxy on his shoulders, when in reality, he shouldn't have ever done that. Obi-Wan said that he may have feared the idea of what the Jedi could do, but there were two new Jedi that needed guidance, and there were two old Jedi who needed help finding their path in this new galaxy. He could make the choice to stay here and allow a collection of books to keep him company, doing the same as Yoda and he did before, or he could learn from his master's mistakes and right his wrongs. It would be very hard for Luke. Having completely cut himself off from the Force, there was no one that he could connect with. He was isolated from every which realm of the Force. Nothing but an ordinary man who lived off the land. Luke Skywalker had a decision to make. On the other side of the galaxy, the Resistance fleet exited hyperspace. Leia, Anakin, and Rey had their conversation. Anakin understood where Leia was coming from, and Anakin also understood how he could handle the training of Rey. It would truthfully be easy for him. As an experienced master, and a student who was so eager to learn the ways of the Force, what more could he ask for him? Especially since he learned that she had an incredibly high ceiling. He could relate to her because of that ceiling. However, her readiness to learn was a bit odd to him. Though as Anakin prepared for his first lesson with Rey, alarms began blaring. Skywalker looked outside the window and could see a number of ships that had just arrived. Without even thinking, he ran to the hangar bay and got into an X-Wing. He got clearance from the bridge and left before Poe could even get to his personal fighter. As Anakin cleared the hangar bay, he intercepted 3 TIE fighters. One of them was a TIE silencer, with a very sleek design. Anakin sped out, blasting at the 3 fighters, forcing Kylo to break off his pursuit of the hangar bay. At the same time, Poe was able to enter his ship and take off. 2 Skywalkers sped across the surface of the Raddus. Anakin was quick on the trigger, and Kylo was a fast pilot. It was very difficult for him, but he was Anakin's grandson. The dogfight carried on as the last tie in the trio was cut down by a speeding Poe Dameron. The duo quickly teamed up on Kylo, forcing the Supremacy to pull its fire from the support vessels to try to hit the 2 X-Wings, which failed. The Resistance craft were pulling out of range, and Kylo needed to fall back. Anakin and Poe pulled off the assault. All at the same time inside the bridge, Leia was prepping to jump to hyperspace, until they realized that the First Order tracked them here. They wouldn't be able to just escape. Well, they had time to kill. They could come up with a plan. Leia was also searching nearby systems, and she brought over longtime friend and ally, Vice Admiral Holdo, to help devise a strategy with her and Admiral Akbar. Rey and Anakin went into a separate chamber to begin her training, which with Anakin was as unorthodox as anything was with him. She didn't know much about, well, anything. She only knew of rumors that were told, and because she never spent any time inside of Kylo Ren's head, she knew literally nothing. Skywalker started her in a polar opposite way of how he started Ahsoka's training. Step 1. Feel the Force. On Ahch-To, while Luke was coming to his decision, trying to figure out what it was that he wanted to do, Obi-Wan began his training of Finn. It was in essence very similar to what Anakin was doing with Rey at the moment. The only difference was the fact that the island was extremely nurturing to the Force. It wasn't stiff and confined like the interior of a battleship. Both new generation of Jedi would be trained simultaneously for hours, even days. When Luke believed he was ready, they took books from the temple and departed from Ahch-To to the beacon that Finn was given by Leia, a way to find his way home to the Resistance. When they arrived, it was very bad timing. The last support vessels were ashes and the Raddus was on its final legs. Though luckily the Resistance had a chance to get to a planet like Crate. It was a strategy created by Vice Admiral Holdo, and because the First Order wasn't monitoring for smaller vessels, it would be the perfect way to escape. The Raddus would be lost, but the Resistance would live to fight another day, which is all that mattered. Holdo told the leaders that she would pilot the Raddus until its final leg. While it may have been an unnecessary loss, she believed that Admiral Ackbar would have a moment in the future when he was needed. Right now, it was time for the Resistance to live on. It would be successful. Without monitoring for smaller vessels, the Resistance would make its escape to Crate, and it would be able to bunker down until the First Order passed by. However, what became distressing was the lack of response from their allies. There was no hope as it seemed. It sucked the life right out of the members of the Resistance, many of them questioning if this fight would ever come to an end. This did pile onto Luke's guilt over what happened. Kylo was even more unstable, and despite Snoke's attempts to connect him with Rey, he was unable to do so. They were closer and it should have been easier, but because Anakin was working so closely with her, there wasn't a solitary moment for Snoke to break through. He was stuck with Ren the entire time, and now with the Resistance apparently dead, Kylo would continue doing his master's bidding, as the First Order began spreading out across the galaxy. What continued to hurt the Resistance was the lack of a heroic moment, a story that could be shared. The escape from the First Order was harrowing, as was their victory over Starkiller, but to the people of the galaxy there wasn't something to latch onto. There wasn't a moment that identified the struggle against the First Order, not something for people to remember or call to in a time of desperation. Leia knew this, and she also knew that with the lack of a response during their time on Crate, she needed to incentivize that they begin to find new ways to cultivate the minds of those around the galaxy to stand up and fight for what was right. Their fight wasn't over, and good people would join them. All they needed to do was lead. Leia took the rebels from Crate to Agen Claws. It was more secretive, and it would be the perfect place for both new Jedi to train, as well as a good place for more rebels to join their cause. The next year would be one especially difficult, but with Obi Wan and Anakin here, they had a means of drawing up support. They obviously couldn't rely on who they were 60 years beforehand, and so they took every ounce of knowledge they gained over their time during the Clone Wars and used it. By this point, they had revealed what happened to them. It was their final battle before the end of the Clone Wars, before Coruscant, and they were yanked from the battlefield. They were, but they weren't. The Force called upon them and explained to them that they would continue to live, but they wouldn't. Their souls were being removed and they were being put into another time, because their inaction would cause generational damage. They would lose everyone in their current timeline anyways, so it'd be up to them to cultivate the minds of this new generation to fight a war that would continue long past each of their own personal deaths. It was up to them to atone for their mistakes. The message the Force gave them is that it could have been prevented had they joined the ones on Mortis. There were several other opportunities presented, and so the Force insisted that if it must suffer, then those who are at the heart of this conflict must suffer as well. With this being shared to Rey and Leia and Luke and Finn, it made a lot more sense. For everyone present, it helped them understand that Anakin and Obi-Wan would be staying full-time, and that it was their mission to be here and destroy the Sith once and for all. The Force did make a point too. While Anakin would bring balance to the Force after spending 20 years as Darth Vader, balance didn't last forever. His inability to bring balance to the Force when he initially should have gave Palpatine all the time he needed to make himself the Immortal One. The years since Crate would be filled with intense missions. While it would be more difficult for Luke and Leia to train Finn and Rey on mission, Obi-Wan and Anakin had no issue with it. The training was split. On Agen Claws, Luke and Leia would oversee the training of Rey and Finn full-time, Obi Wan and Anakin would run missions with Chewie, Poe, and a number of other Resistance heroes like Rose Tico. They would try and inspire where hope had been lost. The First Order was expanding, and without a central government in the galaxy, the title of ruler was sitting openly for anyone to come and claim it. When Anakin and Obi-Wan weren't doing hope-inspiring missions, they were bringing Rey and Finn with them to do other missions on behalf of the Resistance. Some of these were relief efforts, others were more focused on finding new allies or vessels to use. It was hard since the New Republic demilitarized too, but Rey and Finn progressed really well and extremely fast. This was in part to their training. Anakin and Leia took over the training of Rey, while Obi-Wan and Luke watched over Finn's training. Both students excelled unlike any other, and again, this was in major part due to their interest in learning. Both excelled in different aspects of their training, which was entirely due to their teachers. Rey found much more harmony in her path, though reading from the ancient books of the Jedi 24/7 also helped her a lot. She didn't have a lightsaber form, which was Anakin's fault. He knew that it would be too difficult to break down her organic form and rebuild it in a short period of time, so he built off of it. Her more aggressive style made her fit into a variation of Form 4 and 5, so he taught her what best he could, which turned her form into Form 8, simply because there wasn't anything like her form. All of her natural skills with the staff that she had used her entire life were built into this. Anakin and her worked rigorously, and thanks to Leia, it balanced out with some practice in the actual Force. Finn, on the other hand, didn't have as high of a ceiling, simply due to the amount of potential he had. Luke and Obi-Wan had a unique twist to their teaching style. Luke was a bit more aggressive like his father, but he was also a Grand Master at one point, so he wasn't that aggressive. Luke's focus and teachings on the Force allowed Obi-Wan to teach Finn the proper methods of lightsaber combat. The twins were limited in their physical training, which is where Obi-Wan and Anakin excelled at. Finn made an extreme amount of progress too, and it was Luke and Obi-Wan who were perfect teachers for opening up a student who started off so closed off. Finn's lightsaber form developed into a mix of 2 and 4. The quicker strikes along with the heavier swings melded really well with him in the little training he had as a stormtrooper. What surprised Luke the most is what having 6 Jedi did for the Resistance. While they were still considered mythological, their presence was one that people appreciated more than anything. It gave the fight an extra oomph, which at this point the rebels needed more than ever before. Though with Obi-Wan, Rey, Finn, and Anakin, they were able to round up extra support from more mid-rim worlds. It wasn't much, but it was something. On top of that, thanks to Luke, the Jedi decided to go for the hunt to Exegol. He and Lando's trail ran cold at Pisana. Lando stayed there because he was hopeful to find his long-lost daughter, whereas Luke was left to return to his temple. The 4 Jedi, along with Poe, Chewie, 3PO, and BB-8, went to Pisana to find Ochi's ship. The First Order was nowhere to be seen and nowhere near Pisana, so they were able to get in and search. They eventually found it under a sinking pit, and thanks to Kenobi, who knew a little bit of Sith, they were able to trace it to Kef Bir. Obi-Wan technically didn't know Sith. He just knew older language and the ones that were inspired by Sith. So a couple of the syllables and hieroglyphics were similar, and he used those to lead them to the wreckage of the Death Star. Since Crate, Rey and Kylo started their own connection, one that came during glimpses of training. This was being established by Snoke to see if his student would turn. His hope was that Kylo wouldn't be wise enough to resist the bait, and in turn bring Rey to him. If Rey was brought before him, then he could use the information from her to find the Resistance and snuff it out, but it never came. Just as one would expect from a student of Anakin, Rey kept it quiet and she continued to see the brokenness from Ben, believing that it could be turned, and he could become a powerful ally if he did. Without time to focus on it, she forgot about him and focused on the mission to find Exegol. The discovery of the Wayfinder brought Luke to some personal dread. He feared what could be waiting for them on the other side of this journey. It was years before when he first felt the external darkness in the galaxy. The balance lasted for years, but the continued nightmares of Palpatine made him feel as if there was a return of something he didn't know how to prepare for. The truth being that Palpatine was waiting until both twins were gone to show his essence. He allowed the balance to be brought to the galaxy by Vader, and allowed it to remain until the time was to rise up. Because both twins were present, he waited. He wouldn't be able to stop both of them at the same time. Ben Solo was the biggest challenge of the era, and with him already serving Snoke, all that remained were the deaths of Luke and Leia, the only true threat to him. Well, that was only semi-true, because what found him was something he could have never expected. His granddaughter, 3 Skywalkers, a former stormtrooper, and of course, General Kenobi, the negotiator. Palpatine wasn't in a place of self-defense, and because Luke knew how this whole thing worked, they avoided outright killing him. Instead, they simply unplugged him from his device, a singular move that had catastrophic effects. The death of Sidious was the death of a Sith. While Kylo Ren was a dark side user and pledged himself to the darkness, he wasn't a Sith, and Snoke, despite his mastery, wasn't either. Sidious was the last of the Sith, and his death meant that Exegol was ruined. This also did mean that the Jedi needed to run. The entire planet became a weapon. The force of the explosion within the temple sent a ripple through the ground, which pulverized the Sith Eternal fleet full of Zyston-class destroyers. The Jedi didn't know what it was, but thanks to the Falcon, they were able to escape the ruins of the Sith world before it was entirely destroyed. Because Hosnian was gone, the First Order was making a push for the core, and inside said core was Coruscant. Thanks to a little help from Lando, who they ran into on Pisana, the Jedi were able to return to Ajan Kloss to a lot more help than they initially had. Not all of it, but enough. The idea Obi Wan and Anakin had was to set a trap for the First Order at Coruscant. They knew it would be difficult, but once people saw them fighting, they could draw in aid from elsewhere in the galaxy. Anakin expressed that he and Poe could lead a mission against the First Order. Using their talent, they could draw them out and force them into combat. As they were talking, a young voice spoke up. He said that he and his mother could run aid for the two of them as well. Everyone twisted over, and Leia's face lit up. General Syndulla. She made it. With Ezra, Jason, Callus, Sabine, Zeb, and of course Chopper. They would help out in the Ghost. After all, Jason Syndulla learned from the best. Anakin turned to Leia. Well, if his daughter trusted them, then they were as good as gold to him. Their fight had only just begun against the First Order, but this would be their moment to win it all. Lando would try and get them reinforcements. Poe spoke up. He was in the hot seat now. He was a general, and while Leia was overseeing as general, she knew that it was time for the next generation to rise. This fight was as important as her own. Everyone had a seat at the table. Poe told them all that good people would fight if they led them. People would rise up as long as there was hope. Leia and Luke would go to Coruscant's surface to see what inspiration they could cause, which left the final three. Rey spoke up, suggesting that she had a connection and contact with Ben through the Force. She didn't know how, but she believed that he had it within him to change. If he could be turned, then they could have their reunion. But they could also destroy Supreme Leader Snoke as well. Well, they would have to take her word for it. Since Chewie and Lando would be using the Falcon, they needed an alternative method into the Supremacy, and there was an idea for that. Everything was set. The little forces the Resistance had made their way for Coruscant, as Luke and Leia went to the surface to try and inspire the people to fight. Poe, Jason, and Anakin were in the air over Coruscant, preparing for what would come. At the same time, Finn, Obi Wan, and Rey prepared for their fight against the darkness. The interactions between Rey and Ben had been fairly intimate. They trusted each other in a way that couldn't be described. Even though they had limited interactions aside from a glare in the Force to Starkiller, they understood that there was a definite bond between them. It was just a matter of how they would expand upon it. With the help of some allies led by Janna from Kef Bir, there was a unit of former stormtroopers ready to storm the Supremacy once it arrived. When the First Order arrived at a hyperspace, they came with everything. The Resistance didn't have much, but the buffer between them and the First Order fleet were 3 ships. All 3 were launching into the attack. Thankfully, Jason learned from Hera, because she was one of the few people to ever outflow some of the best in the galaxy, including Darth Vader. TIE fighters fled from the hangar bay, and the skirmish began. Luke and Leia showed off the fight happening over the city planet. The firefight was on. 3 of the best pilots the galaxy had ever seen, thrown together to fight the rise of an evil regime. General Hux called upon Captain Kennedy's dreadnought, which had been since repaired, requesting that he bombard any rebel fleets that dare make their way for them. The Resistance craft in the distance was far too small for them to target. Lando at the same time was off of Coruscant, sending out a message to everyone, calling in favors from friends, new and old. Out from under the Supremacy, the freighter transport carrying 3 Jedi and a number of former stormtroopers sped into the lower hangar bay of the Supremacy. Out from the ship came the Orbaks from Kef Bir, ridden by the former stormtroopers, some of them breaking off to capture some AT-STs, while the Jedi pushed for the throne room. Rose, along with a couple other Resistance warriors from Ajan Kloss, fought for control over the hangar bay. As they were going, Finn saw Captain Phasma, making her way out of the corridor, leading her stormtroopers. He stopped in his tracks. Both Rey and Obi-Wan turned back, needing Finn to be with them during this attack. But they knew where Finn's heart was. This was for all of their soldiers, all the ones that had been taken for the First Order and first to serve under their rule. He ran forward, just as the former stormtroopers charged the First Order troopers. Kenobi and Rey were all that were left, but they had this. They literally had to have this. If they didn't, this entire assault could fail. Stalling the Supreme Leader gave them time to hope the Resistance and the people of the galaxy would rise up. As already proven from the battle at Dakar, General Hux would be stalled, so that's what they were relying on. The two Jedi entered the elevator to the throne room. Obi-Wan told Rey that she would be alright, and she smiled. Her imposter syndrome had been present the entire time, building up to this moment, but she was prepared. Fearful, but prepared, and thanks to her teacher, she was ready, and more ready than ever before. When they entered, they drew their lightsabers. Snoke just smiled, calling them pathetic. He raised his hand, and his Praetorian guard moved in. At the same time, Kylo stood up, but Snoke told him to wait. Obi-Wan and Rey looked at each other. That's all they needed. Back to back they went in. Rey was much cleaner with her fighting, and the aid of two masters, one old and one young, helped exponentially. She protected herself until Snoke used the Force to pull her from her guard. Her feet dragged out from underneath her. Kylo watched her slip across the ground in front of him. At the same time, Obi-Wan was backed into a corner, using his mastery against the 7 remaining guards. Thanks to his perfection in Form 3, he should be able to handle this, but the Praetorians attacked in quick movements, doubling what the other was doing. Snoke told Kylo that he knew about his little alliance with this girl. If he truly wanted to be a Jedi again, then he would die. So instead of choosing weakness, he could ignite his weapon and kill her, before he could claim the kill on the other Jedi who wanted to show up with her. Ren didn't know what to do. He looked down at Rey, who was being held in position by Snoke with the Force. Down in the hangar bay, the battle got to a point where Finn could creep along the battle lines and get the Phasma. The two of them engaged quickly when she realized it was the traitor. Finn ignited his blade and engaged with her. Their strikes were fierce, and the resentment they had for each other was intense. Their weapons clashed endlessly as a former stormtrooper pressed forward. Finn and Phasma broke off as he expressed how she sold out her own men on the Star Killer. Even if she won today, she'd be nothing but a liar and a traitor to herself. The words of someone like Finn was almost a rallying cry. Some of the troopers heard it, while others were left completely dumbfounded. Phasma could feel her grip slipping, and she lunged at Finn. He sidestepped her, blasting her helmet with his blade, before stepping back. He waited for her to rise, and when she did, she told him that he was always scum. With a slick smile, he called himself Rebel Scum, before slashing upwards across her chest, killing her instantly. Kylo twisted his lightsaber down towards Rey's face. The crimson blade close enough to her, where the slightest tap would extinguish her life. Snoke loved it. One moment, and she would be gone. Before she could be killed, Kylo threw her lightsaber into the air towards Snoke. He caught it with the Force and opened his eyes, calling him a pathetic child for ever attempting to betray him. Ben smirked, the way only a Solo could, before twisting his body towards the blade and reaching his other hand up. Snoke was trying to throw the blade away from him, but it wasn't working. Rey got up and joined him, pressing as hard as they could against Snoke, the fight still raging behind them, until Rey's saber exploded, sending a shockwave outwards, killing Snoke in the process and throwing Ben and Rey from their feet. Obi-Wan was able to stall long enough for Rey and Ben to get up, before Ben grabbed his crimson blade and engaged in the fight against the Praetorians to help out Obi-Wan. Poe, Jason, and Anakin continued their distraction, which seemed to be like it was working. A Mon Cala cruiser dropped out of hyperspace. There was hope after all. It was surrounded by a couple of support vessels, and it was manned by Admiral Raddus's grandson, a young but vibrant captain. They prepared their shields until Captain Kennedy's fleet-destroying dreadnought open-fired and obliterated not just the flagship but the support fleet, which was destroyed in the explosion next to it. Any potential fire or hope felt extinguished as the 3 main pilots watched the ship sink. Was this it? There was no knowledge of how the fight was going inside the Supremacy. For all they knew, all their friends could be dead. Skywalker told them that they needed to target the dreadnought. Poe shot back over and said that without the Star Fortress Mega Bomber fleet, they wouldn't be able to do anything against it. It was either those or Y-Wings, but Y-Wings wouldn't be able to do enough damage to the dreadnought. Anakin was still shocked at the notion of still using Y-Wings, but they needed an alternative. Hera was in the co-pilot seat trying to figure it out, but there was no strategy. Everything was looking more difficult than the victory at Lothal. Ezra was in the back on the cannons, trying to see if they could find a way out of this. Obviously, they were still being hunted by TIE fighters, and they were cutting through them. Poe called out for reinforcements and told them they needed to get to the surface. He apologized to them. He didn't think they were going to win this one. He didn't want to lose anyone. Perhaps they could fight another day. Anakin looked over the viewport and saw nothing. It was a feeling as hopeless as ever. Jason told his mother that he was sorry, that they couldn't finish the war she ended. She shook her head. Poe's voice just stammered over the radio, telling them that there was just too many of them. The First Order fleet began moving towards the city world, preparing to claim it as the capital of the First Order regime. Before Poe could call for the full retreat, he heard a voice cut through the frequency. Lando had a bit of excitement in his voice, telling Poe that there was more of us. There were more of us. Poe pulled his X-Wing back and looked at all of it in its glory. The sight of 3 fighters standing up to the might of the First Order did it. The fact that they could just deter an entire fleet from an attack on a free world just proved that all it took was every single person ready to fight. General Hux was informed of the massive influx of vessels entering the system. The issue was, the one he didn't understand, was the fact that it wasn't a fleet. It was just people. For Anakin, it was a moment unlike any other. When he was a boy, his mother always said the biggest problem in the galaxy was that people never helped each other. Now they were. Everything had come full circle. The people of the galaxy followed the Millennium Falcon into battle over Coruscant. The First Order fleet, which was for the most part exclusively here, was caught off guard. They tried to band together to fight back, but the numbers were overwhelming. The Falcon pulled over the battle, firing down on its opponents. Wedge Antilles was in the back on the cannons of the Falcon, firing away the ties. At the same time, radio came overhead from Rose, inside the Supremacy. They had won. Snoke was dead, and while Ben Solo was back to their side, they were leaving. Anakin told them that he would cover them. Jason followed suit. The troop transport blasted out of the Supremacy as the final fight of the First Order came to an end. Across the galaxy, people rose up to fight against this evil regime and its presence. The battle wasn't as long as the first battle of Coruscant, but its significance couldn't be overstated. It ended the fight. The Empire, First Order, Final Order, and the legacy of Darth Sidious came to an end here at Coruscant. General Hux went down with the Supremacy when he went to check on Snoke, only to find pieces of him shattered around the room. The victory was celebrated for days on Coruscant, one shared between multiple generations of freedom fighters. People came together for one massive victory celebration. There were tears, hugs, reunion, and joy everywhere. Rey, Finn, Obi Wan, Ben, and Rose were on the transport with each other, but when they exited, they got to see a mother and a son reunite, when the story all began with a mother and a son separating. A moment Leia could have only dreamed of until it came true. Anakin was able to reunite with his children and his grandson, all of them somehow older than him. Rey's newfound family was with her, whether it be Obi-Wan, Finn, Poe, Anakin, Luke, Leia, or Ben. It was all wonderful. It was the celebration of a lifetime. They did it. The war was won. What followed the war would only be what a new generation could do in the ashes of the New Republic. The failure to listen was their undoing. The failure to see the mistakes of yesterday was a real reminder of what complacency could do, and the true travesty of being sentient. Leia could be a part of this rebuilding. Despite being related to Vader, she ended tyranny twice, and it was time people learned to forgive. A new era would be reinstated. For the 2 Jedi who'd traveled decades, they'd have a chance to find their own sense of peace. With Rey and Finn as a new generation of Jedi, and Ben Solo returning to the light, there was a very real chance of restarting the Jedi Order. Anakin and Obi-Wan belonged there, because while their actions in the past may have led them to this future in this moment, learning from their mistakes was an important lesson in all of this. They would be brothers forever, and they would have a distinct honor for rebuilding something they had known their entire lives. With family here, and those most eager to rebuild, the future of the Jedi was just as sound as a future fit for the galaxy. And that, my friends, is our story. Special thanks to the Grand Tier Patron who requested this video. Other Grand Tier Patrons are coming out later. Special thanks to Galvin Gaming, Tristan, Mandalore, Sir William, 1767, Darth Revan, Granddaddy Bane, Cullen Rooney, The Last Jedi, Apollo, Weewu670, Annika Stank Runner, CT7567, Toaster Oven, Oz of Oz, Darth Knox, The Eternal Padawan, Joshua Tem, Johnny Naguin, Sans Skeleton, Jedi Sloth, Mr. Yeet Gamer, Lord Cali, Galaxy66, Mad Studios, Anakin003, Lord Draken, Photos Legacy Star Wars, Erebus, Rex the Wolf, The Man with 3 First Names, Darksaint46, Baron Joshua, and Lord Deadwing for supporting the channel. If you want to support me in other ways, go check out the Patreon. Otherwise, let's talk about the story. I'm not gonna lie, it was really hard trying to figure out how to piece everyone together in the story, but it was super fun. I've mentioned this before, I love writing the sequels, I love the sequels, so having time to write in them is always such a great joy for me, and talking about some of my favorite aspects of it. And so it was just kind of fun pairing up the different pairs with each other. We've already done an Anakin Rey story, and I got something coming out with Finn and Anakin later, so I didn't want to ruin that. And so it felt more natural for Obi-Wan and Luke to be with Finn in the story, being that Obi-Wan was someone that barely made it as a Jedi. He'd be able to help Finn open up. I think Rey and Anakin would get along like classically, and obviously with Leia there too. I think it would just be a great trio, the way that trios would be kind of melded together. And then the final battle was very obviously reminiscent of the battle at Exegol. I just wanted to be with the First Order rather than the Final Order for this particular video. So anyways, I hope you all enjoyed. I love you all, spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.